The Reverend Dr. David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, this bill is one that contains a number of sensible enough changes. We will be supporting it in the House. It does get on with some amendments that are required to make sure that our tax law maintains its status as broad-based and low rate. And that general approach to taxation has served us well over many, many years. Of course, on this side of the House, we will see another opportunity to make the tax system fairer and more productive overall for past, because there are a lot of things, of course, that are not in this bill that could be in this bill. There could be attempts to stop the distortions we have in our economy that see people speculating in the housing market rather than investing in the productive sector. There could be a number of other measures, but I want to speak mainly, Mr. Speaker will be pleased to hear about what is in this bill, and that includes a number of changes to the student loan area where the problem is evident. Where people repay their student loans, they should feel good about that. They shouldn't feel jealous of others who run overseas and flout the law. And that does happen. I've certainly heard of instances where people have thumbed their nose at authorities and said, if you're living overseas and you can get away with it, you should be able to get away with it. Frankly, I don't think that cuts the mustard. I think that people that borrow against the scheme with a certain set of conditions should be expected to repay their loan. And so I want to take perhaps a slightly more positive tone and congratulate the government on making some small steps in that direction. The information sharing suggestion with the Australian tax authorities sounds sensible enough to me. And also the change where it is required now that instead of formally notifying, the department will accept notification in writing is kind of logical. We've moved on from the days where you have to have a carrier pigeon or a Royal Herald deliver a letter, and there is a definition around formally notifying, which makes it complex currently for an email to suffice as a communication. And so, these kind of updates are sensible. We should welcome them. They're common sense, where we are now accepting that an email is a legitimate form of communication. Other recommendations in the bill, and I was going through a number of them, are about clarification. They are ones where, it's simply making sure that there aren't either loopholes or misunderstandings, and there are a large number in the area of student loan legislation that are proposed. And I'll just, for anybody watching at home, the first portion of this explanatory document is devoted to that particular task of making sure that the law is clear for people to understand, and that is a good thing and should be affirmed. The issue of GST is also raised in the bill, and GST on online purchases is tackled in a minor way. The government has been tepid on this, to say the least. When I was tax spokesperson a couple of years ago, there was a process set up to come to a view on this. It was pushed out past the election in order to avoid any controversy. The government certainly could not be accused of leading on this issue. They couldn't be accused of leading on many issues, actually, except for maybe in the area of payroll debacles at the moment. Generally, they duck for cover. It's a government that seems to like managing decline rather than having bright new ideas. In this instance, they are allowing for GST to be collected on downloads, and that's a step in the right direction. It, of course, doesn't address the issue that many retailers in New Zealand have, where purchases of, if you buy a $50 pair of sneakers or a book from overseas, it doesn't attract GST, and this does nothing to change that. So this bill doesn't tackle the issue that really is confronting retailers in New Zealand, and I think retailers across the country will be very disappointed that after so many promises and such a long process with soft noises from the government, that issue has not been tackled, and we will see retailers continue to struggle against offshore competitors who don't pay tax in New Zealand and don't have that additional charge required to capture that tax applied to them. So that GST issue is an issue that could and should be dealt with, and it's good to see the government sticking a tepid toe in the water to address it. It's good to see those tidy-ups on the student loan bill. But overall, as I say, the government is dragging its feet. This GST on products issue has been around for a very long time, and it's, I guess, another example in my mind of this government tilting the field away from small business. You know, those people that risk their shirts every day, that have a second mortgage on their house to try and get a retail business off the ground, are disadvantaged by the tax law as it stands. And this government seems to have it in for small business, in my view. There have been fewer small businesses created on an annualised basis under this government than under the past government. They've introduced legislation that requires employers to collect overdue child support earnings. And that's a burden on a small business owner when they know the personal details of their employees that they otherwise wouldn't have known. They've introduced a lot of red tape for small business, and here we have again an opportunity to level the playing field that they haven't taken. And so small business again is disadvantaged against the multinationals who will avoid paying tax on the items that they must pay tax on when they sell them in New Zealand shops. But we shouldn't be too surprised. It is the best the government can come up with, despite being in their 8th year of government. It is too little, too late. But as I said, we will support it because it's a step, albeit a small one, in the right direction. We just think small businesses in New Zealand deserve better. They do deserve better. There aren't many Kiwi companies, and I think others have touched on this, that are competing with iTunes or Netflix. You know, the issue that they're tackling is not one that's facing many New Zealand businesses right now. The one that is facing most New Zealand businesses has not been tackled in this legislation. The family-run businesses in the main street, they are the ones that are going to continue to be disadvantaged by the unlevel playing field that National maintains. This government does seem to have an aversion to doing the difficult things. They certainly are letting the Kiwi dream slip. You know, the home ownership. Lowest home ownership rates in New Zealand since 1951. They don't seem willing to tackle the big issues. They seem prepared to fill up the odd gap here and there in this legislation, but not to take on the really big issues of what a fairer tax system would look like overall. What would a system look like that ensured everybody paid their fair share of tax, not just the hard-working middle New Zealand who go to work every day and those that take the risks and own a small business. They don't seem willing to tackle those issues that would ensure New Zealanders had a growing prosperity rather than, as we've seen, an almost zero increase in real terms in wages across the country. The only increase in our GDP in the last year, we've learnt in recent days, has been as a result of immigration. There has been no increase in terms of wages in New Zealand, and that's, you know, a sad reality, and it won't change if we don't take on these bigger issues. So the bill itself, as I've said, we will support. We will support the small changes that are fingers in the dike, I guess, of the current system, because it would be worse without them. But it's hard to be inspired by the kind of legislation we're debating here on a Thursday that bears a title Taxation, Residential Land Withholding Tax, GST on Online Services and Student Loans Bill. It is the small stuff, and this government seems to be focused on the small stuff. I hope they can do better. I wish they would lift their aspirations and look to create the Kiwi dream like a future Labour government will do.